Sagittarius, what's coming is scary, but God sees you, and this has never happened to anyone else. Dear Sagittarius, something ancient has stirred within you. You may not be able to explain it, not in words, but there's a feeling, quiet yet undeniable, rising beneath your skin, a vibration in your bones, a whisper in your dreams. Perhaps it began as restlessness, or a sudden shift in your energy, like the wind changing direction without warning. But now it's becoming clearer. Something is coming, and it's unlike anything you've known before. This isn't a message meant to frighten you. It's a message meant to awaken, to call you home to a truth you've carried across lifetimes, but perhaps have forgotten in this one. You were never meant to walk an ordinary path. You were born under the fire sign of Sagittarius, not just a seeker of truth but a vessel of it. Your soul is not lost, it is being summoned. If your spirit has been calling out for a sign, for confirmation, for something to help make sense of what you've been feeling, this is it. Stay close. Listen with more than just your ears. And if you feel touched by these words in a way you can't quite explain, let your heart guide your hands. Leave a comment below, share the light, or simply breathe it in. Because what's about to unfold was meant for you, and only you. Gate 1, your soul was marked before you even knew. Sagittarius, you were never meant to arrive unnoticed. Long before you took your first breath in this life, your soul stood before a sacred council of light and said, "Send me. I will carry the fire." And so, you were born not just under a star sign but under a spiritual promise. A quiet contract etched in stardust and sealed with courage. That promise has always lived within you, even when your outer world gave you no reason to believe in it. You've likely felt different since childhood, as though your feet were on this earth, but your heart belonged to a realm much farther away. You sat in classrooms and listened with half an ear, because the other half was tuned into something deeper. You were the child who stared out the window, not because you were distracted, but because you were communing with something larger than words. You were the one who asked strange questions too early, who saw through people too quickly, who wandered too far without ever seeming lost. Even when you felt alone, you carried an ancient knowing. I'm not like the others, but I'm here for a reason. And still, that reason remained veiled. You searched, as all Sagittarians do, for truth, for expansion, for the meaning behind your unspoken ache. But instead of answers, you often found delays, detours, doors closed for no clear reason. People misunderstood you, labeled you, feared the intensity of your inner flame. Some even tried to tame it, to make you smaller, quieter, easier to understand. And sometimes, dear soul, you let them. Not because you didn't know your worth, but because you were tired of standing alone in a room full of noise where no one really listened. But even in those moments when your confidence wavered and your vision blurred, the mark remained. It glowed faintly behind your ribs. It sang to you in dreams, in déjà vu, in moments of synchronicity so precise they made your heart skip. It was there every time you gave more than you received. Every time you stood at the edge of something new and terrifying, and leapt anyway. That leap is your signature. The fire that moves through your blood was never meant to stay in one place. You are not here to conform. You are here to transform. One woman I once guided, born under Sagittarius, shared how she always felt called to travel. Not just across land, but into people's lives, into their pain. I can be in a new city for a day, and already someone's telling me their story, she said. Strangers trust me, but the people closest to me, they don't always see me. I looked at her and said, "That's because you're not here to be seen by everyone. Only those who are ready for truth can meet your gaze without flinching." She cried, not because she was sad, but because she had finally heard something her soul had known all along. Sagittarius, the reason you've struggled to feel at home isn't because there's something wrong with you. It's because your spirit was never meant to settle in a place that doesn't honor truth. And truth, in its purest form, is often uncomfortable. It asks questions before it gives comfort. It burns illusions before it reveals light. That's why you're here. To burn away what no longer serves and to guide others through the smoke. But first you had to walk through that smoke yourself. You had to question everything, your worth, your beliefs, even your purpose, until you could no longer pretend. Until the only thing left standing was your soul, raw and uncovered, whispering, "This is who I really am." That moment, Sagittarius, that was your return. Not to perfection but to your origin. To the wild, radiant soul who was marked long before any wound ever touched you. Have you ever wondered why people are drawn to you, even when they don't understand you? Why they come to you when their world falls apart? It's not because you always have the answers. It's because your energy reminds them that answers even exist. You embody the sacred flame that says, "There is more. Keep going." But who reminds you? You've been that guiding light for so many, and yet you've often walked your hardest roads alone. Not because no one loves you, but because your path requires solitude, silence, sacred distance from the noise of the world so you can hear what others have forgotten how to listen for. Your loneliness was never a punishment. It was a consecrated space carved out by the universe itself so that when the time came, you would remember. And now, Sagittarius, that time has come. Something inside you is stirring again. A pulse you haven't felt in years. A wildness you once tried to tame is roaring awake. You are not going crazy. You are not too much. You are not broken. You are remembering. Your soul was marked to bring light into places that forgot how to receive it. Not because you are better, but because you are brave. Brave enough to carry the flame through darkness and still not let it die. So today, if your heart feels like it's been lit from the inside, if something in these words touches a chord so deep it hurts a little, take it as confirmation. Not from me, but from the part of you that's always known. You are not who the world told you to be. You are who you've always been. And the fire you carry isn't here to burn you down. It's here to awaken you. Breathe into that truth. Let it stretch inside your chest. And if you feel called, write it down, not for anyone else but for yourself. A simple line. I remember who I am. That's enough, because the journey is only just beginning. And in the next gate, we will walk through the shift that's already on its way. The kind of shift that only comes once in a soul's lifetime. And Sagittarius, it's headed straight for you. Gate 2. The shift is coming, but not to break you. Sagittarius, have you ever looked around and suddenly felt like everything you once relied on had changed shape? The friendships you once clung to feel distant. The routines that once grounded you now feel like cages. The dreams you once chased seem to lose their glow. And amidst all that unraveling, you ask yourself, what's happening to me? But the deeper question, the one your soul already knows, is this: what is trying to be born through me? This, dear Sagittarius, is not your collapse. It is your shedding. You are not falling apart. You are falling out of alignment with the version of yourself that was never truly yours to begin with. The titles you were told to chase, the relationships you were told to preserve, the image of success you were expected to uphold, all of it was built on sand. And now the tide is rising. Not to drown you, but to wash away what was never meant to stay. There's something terrifying about this kind of shift. You wake up and feel like a stranger in your own life. The clothes you used to wear don't feel like your skin anymore. The places you once called home feel foreign. And the people you once loved, some of them can no longer reach you. It hurts. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because your vibration has shifted. And when your spirit expands, not everyone can come with you. One man I once guided, a Sagittarius in his early 40s, told me, I feel like my whole world is cracking open. I thought I was building a life. But now everything feels hollow. I asked him one question. Was it your life, or someone else's story that you were trying to make your own? He paused, breathed, and finally whispered, I think I've been living a version of me that would be easier for others to accept. And in that moment, his awakening began. Sagittarius, you were not made to live a life that pleases the expectations of others. You were created to live a life that ignites your soul. And when the old stories no longer fit, the universe doesn't ask politely, it begins to shake the foundation. That shaking may come in the form of loss, endings, confusion, silence. But don't mistake the silence for punishment. It's space. Sacred space. Space for something new to emerge. The shift that's coming to you now is not here to destroy you. It's here to dismantle the illusions that kept you from your own power. It's here to burn away what no longer holds your truth. It's here to remove the masks, not just from others but from you. Because underneath all the strength and laughter and wanderlust is a soul who is finally ready to stop running. Not from the world, but from yourself. Sagittarius, you are the fire sign that seeks. You chase knowledge. You chase meaning. You chase the horizon. But what happens when the next truth you need to find isn't outside of you, But within, this transformation may come with grief. You'll grieve the version of you who smiled through betrayal. You'll mourn the part of you who said, "I'm fine," when your heart was breaking. You'll bury the version of yourself who tried so hard to be loved that you forgot to love yourself first. And when that grief comes, let it move through you like rain through a forest, because that rain isn't destroying the trees. It's nourishing the roots. The truth is, what's being taken from you now was never truly yours. The doors closing are not your failure. They are divine redirection. The relationships falling away are not rejection. They are spiritual protection. Even the confusion you feel, it's not evidence that you're lost. It's proof that you're no longer willing to follow a map that was drawn for someone else's journey. Buddha once said, "When the student is ready, the teacher appears." But sometimes, Sagittarius, the teacher is not a person. It's the loss, the silence, the heartbreak, the sudden stillness after a season of running. And in that stillness, you begin to hear something sacred, your own voice. You were not meant to just survive this life. You were meant to be transformed by it, to be broken open, not broken down, to walk through the fire, not to be consumed by it, but to be refined within it. This is your refinement. This is your sacred undoing. This is the holy chaos before the order. Let it come. Don't resist what is collapsing. Bless it. Thank it for carrying you this far. And then release it. Because what's waiting on the other side of this shift isn't just a better life. It's your real life. The one that aligns with the truth of your spirit. The one that doesn't require you to shrink, to perform, to pretend. And I know, you've been brave for so long. You've held so much. You've walked through dark forests and pretended it was just a path. But now, Sagittarius, you don't need to carry everything anymore. You don't need to be strong just to prove you're worthy of being loved. You are worthy because you exist. And your softness is not a flaw. It is the proof that you have not let the world harden your fire into stone. If you're reading this and your heart is trembling, it's because your soul recognizes the truth. This shift will not be gentle, but it will be sacred. And if you allow it, it will deliver you to a version of yourself that has always been waiting for you. Not the one shaped by survival, but the one forged by surrender. So breathe. You don't need to rush. You don't need to have the answers. You just need to trust that something deeper is guiding you now. Something older than fear. Something wilder than logic. Something truer than the voices that once told you you were too much. This is your moment, Sagittarius. Not to rise like the world expects, but to rise like your soul has always known how to. Quietly, authentically, radiantly, from the ashes of what no longer fits. You're not falling apart. You're remembering who you are. And the next gate, Gate 3, will take you deeper into the fire. Not to burn you, but to show you the love that cannot be destroyed. The love that has always been waiting to rise through you. Gate 3, the love that cannot be destroyed. Sagittarius, beneath the ashes of every storm you've survived, there remains one ember that has never gone out. Love. Not the kind you see in fairy tales. Not the one wrapped in perfect endings or pretty words. But the kind of love that survives even when it's been forgotten. The kind that whispers, "I am still here," even after everything else has vanished. This is not a gate of romance. This is a gate of truth. Because before you can love another with depth and clarity, you must recognize the one form of love that can never leave you. Your soul's divine love for itself. The eternal light that's burned through lifetimes, through betrayals, through broken dreams, and through every moment you thought you were alone. You weren't. This love stayed. Quietly. Faithfully. Sagittarius, you were born with a fire in your chest. But no one told you that fire wasn't just meant to explore the world. It was meant to illuminate the forgotten corners of your own being. And when others saw your brightness, some were inspired but others were intimidated. You were too honest. Too intense. Too alive. So they tried to dim you, to fit you into containers not made for someone like you. You tried to shrink, to accommodate, to please. You traded parts of your soul just to be accepted in rooms that couldn't handle your light. But love, the real kind, never asks you to become less. It never demands silence in exchange for approval. It never tells you to hide your joy so others can feel taller. And when you met people who couldn't love you as you were, it wasn't because you were too much. It was because they had never learned how to love something so wild, so free, so true. Do you remember the first time your heart broke? Not from a relationship, but from realizing someone you loved could not meet you where you stood. They couldn't see the depth of your loyalty. They couldn't return the level of honesty you offered. And you told yourself, maybe I expect too much. But that's not the truth. The truth is, you didn't expect too much. You simply offered more than they were capable of receiving. And that, Sagittarius, is not a fault. It is a reflection of your soul's greatness. I once met a Sagittarius woman in her late 30s who had spent years loving a man who saw her magic as a threat. He told her she was too emotional, too idealistic, too driven. And she believed him, until one day she caught herself walking through her own life like a guest. That's when she realized, I haven't been living. I've been auditioning for love I already deserve. She left. Not out of anger but from love, real love for herself. And in doing so, she finally stopped asking for permission to exist. That's the kind of love I speak of here. A love that doesn't wait to be chosen because it already knows it is worthy. A love that holds you when no one else does. A love that says, even if the world misunderstands me, I will not abandon myself. Sagittarius, you've been carrying the pieces of old heartbreaks like quiet stones in your chest. You've given and given until you forgot where you ended and the other person began. You've forgiven when no apology came. You've stayed when silence answered your pain. And through it all, a part of you still believed in love. That part, that flickering hope, is holy. It is what makes you rare. The world will always tell you to be strong, to move on, to not feel so deeply. But you weren't made for numbness. You were made for passion, for truth, for burning love that does not apologize for its intensity. And the love that lives in you is not a weakness. It is the divine evidence that you have never let the darkness turn your heart to stone. Now the question isn't, will someone love you? The question is, will you stop leaving yourself to chase the shadows of those who never truly stayed? Because real love is not found in another person. It is discovered when you stop betraying yourself for the sake of connection. God does not ask you to earn love. He created you from it. And if you've ever felt like your soul was breaking open just from trying to be enough, know this. You are already enough. Not because someone said so, but because your very breath is the proof that you carry love too ancient to be destroyed by time, betrayal, or absence. Let yourself return to it. Return to the way your heart beats when you're alone and no one is watching. Return to the child version of you who believed in impossible dreams. Return to the sacred voice inside that still calls your name. Softly, patiently, eternally. And if you need a sign, here it is. The one who will truly love you is not the one who fixes you. It's the one who meets you exactly where you are and says, I see you, and I will not run. But before they appear, you must say those words to yourself first. I see me, and I will not run. Because once you stop running from your own worth, you will stop chasing love that asks you to abandon it. And you, Sagittarius, are not here to chase. You are here to shine, to rise, to burn with a love that begins within and radiates outward like a constellation too bright to be ignored. And when you love yourself with that level of devotion, you will begin to attract only those who know how to hold a star without trying to dim it. This, dear soul, is the love that cannot be destroyed. The kind that stays. The kind that heals. The kind that waits until you remember that it was never lost, only forgotten. And when you walk into Gate 4, we will speak not of love but of awakening. Of what happens when the soul finally stops dimming itself and steps into the divine purpose it was born to live. Gate 4, the awakening beyond the fire. Sagittarius, there comes a moment in every soul's life when the fire that once seemed to burn everything down begins to reveal something else, truth. Not the kind that arrives with fanfare or clarity, but the quiet, undeniable realization that you were never broken, only being reshaped. For a long time you mistook the falling apart for failure. You looked at your reflection and only saw what had been lost, who had left, what had gone wrong. But underneath the rubble, there was always something waiting. Something not meant to be rescued but remembered. Your awakening. You were never meant to stay inside the ruins of your old self, Sagittarius. You were meant to rise from them like a phoenix, not reborn but redefined. There is no going back to who you used to be, and that is the greatest gift life could offer you. Because who you were was shaped by survival. Who you are becoming is shaped by truth. The pain that once silenced you is now the very echo that calls others to awaken. The grief that once emptied you has become the well from which compassion now overflows. You used to ask, why me? Why all this fire, all these lessons, all this loss? But now, as you stand in the center of your soul's quiet revolution, the answer begins to unfold, not in logic, but in a deep inner yes, a recognition that you were chosen to carry the fire because you would never let it burn you bitter. You would let it burn away the illusions, the patterns, the roles you never truly fit. And you did. You let the fire take what no longer belonged. You let it sear through your denial, your attachment, your self-forgetting. And now what remains is not ashes but essence. Your essence. Pure. Luminous. Unapologetic. This awakening, Sagittarius, is not a single moment. It is not a loud epiphany or a spiritual high. It is a daily return to truth. It is waking up and choosing to live aligned with your own energy, even when it makes others uncomfortable. It is saying no without guilt. It is resting without explanation. It is honoring your intuition before anyone else's opinion. It is speaking your truth, even if your voice shakes. It is walking away when your soul starts to dim. And it is standing still long enough to feel God breathing through you, whispering, "This is who you really are." You don't need to rush anymore. The path ahead will not vanish if you slow down. In fact, the more still you become, the more clearly the path will reveal itself. That is how awakening works. It isn't loud. It isn't forceful. It doesn't demand, it invites. It doesn't prove, it reveals. And now it is revealing you to you. You thought you needed to become someone, but the truth is, you only needed to remember who you've always been. The traveler, the seeker, the sacred fire bearer. You came into this life not to find meaning, but to create it. You are not here to mimic someone else's idea of success. You are here to live your life as a prayer, a message, a map others can follow. Not because you told them how, but because you walked it first barefoot, through pain and doubt and wonder. Your life is a living scripture. Not perfect, not polished, but powerful beyond belief. You do not need to teach others with your words. Your presence is the teaching. Your joy is the proof. Your peace is the evidence. Your courage is the transmission. When you stand in your light, you don't need to convince anyone. The frequency speaks for itself. And yes, Sagittarius, there will still be days when the old fears rise. There will be moments when you doubt again. But that is not regression, it is integration. Awakening is not about being fearless. It is about being faithful. And you have been faithful to your path even when you couldn't see the destination. You kept walking. You kept trusting. You kept showing up for your life when it felt easier to disappear. And that, dear soul, is the mark of one who is already living their purpose. Not because of titles or applause, but because your life has become a lighthouse for others who have yet to find the shore. The fire has done its work. Now the light begins. Not as a sudden burst, but as a steady golden presence rising from within. Your awakening is not the end of the story. It is the sacred threshold where living begins, not from the outside in, but from the soul outward. You are no longer chasing destiny. You are walking it. With every breath, every step, every choice to stay true to yourself, you become what you once searched for. This is your gift to the world. This is your offering. This is your becoming. And what comes next, Sagittarius, is not for the old you. It is for the version of you who finally stopped apologizing for existing. It is for the you who chose to heal instead of hide. It is for the you who is ready not just to survive but to soar. Conclusion. The journey continues within you. Sagittarius, if you've come this far, then your soul has already begun its return. Not to the past. Not to the version of yourself who once begged to be seen, but to the radiant being you have always been underneath the layers, beneath the silence, beyond the wounds. You have walked through gates that not everyone has the courage to enter. You have sat beside your own sorrow and chose not to abandon yourself. You have heard truths that many avoid their entire lives, and instead of running, you stayed. You listened. You felt. You allowed the sacred fire to burn through what no longer belonged. That is not something small. That is a miracle. And the most miraculous part is that you are still open, still soft, still willing to love despite everything. That is how I know. You are no longer searching for the light. You are becoming it. Not with perfection, not with ease, but with truth, with presence, with grace that knows pain and still decides to rise. The world may never fully understand the depth of your journey, but you do, and that is enough. From now on, let your life speak more than your words ever could. Let your joy be your rebellion. Let your peace be your offering. Let your presence be the quiet revolution that awakens something sacred in others. You are the living proof that it is possible to walk through fire and not be consumed, to lose everything and still not lose yourself, to be chosen not because you are the strongest but because you are the most real. And now, dear Sagittarius, go forward not with fear but with reverence. The universe has already heard your silent prayers, the ones you whispered at night, asking for guidance, for clarity, for meaning. This message is part of that answer. Not the end, but the beginning of a more aligned chapter. So if your soul has felt seen here, if your heart has softened just a little more, let that be the sign. You are exactly where you need to be. Your light is not just for you. It is the torch that will help others remember their way. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If this message found a home in your heart, consider leaving a small sign behind. A comment, a share, a quiet moment of stillness, so that the energy we've created here together can ripple outward. Like the archer you are, always aiming higher, always guided by the stars, may your next steps be taken with trust, with love, and with the sacred knowing that you are never alone. You are watched over. You are chosen. And your light, yes, your very light, is just beginning to rise.